The language is not so friendly.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to night 2 of the Finance Committee Budget Review. Tonight we begin with the Peabody Institute Library, and I'd ask that our library director, and is the chair present? I believe so.
Yes,
Yes?
she is. Yes. Is this
Welcome.
on?
And
Is that on? Yes.
I think you have a number of trustees here, if you'd like to introduce
I
them.
do
and any other
so.
staff.
I have Irene Conti right here, Donna Hopkins, Natalie Fiore, and also Julie Curtis, and then my assistant director, Jennifer McGeorge. So they are all here with me tonight. Thank you all for coming as well. So hello, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you again. Oh, wait, it doesn't like me. Do I have to point it at you? Oh, there it goes. All right. Yay. All right, so we'll be short and sweet, hopefully, unless you have lots of questions. But this is our budget. So we did have the $10,000 cut that we did to aid with the budget shortfall. This is taken directly from our materials, which we already had a excess. We're way over where we need, not way over, but we're over where we need to be as far as the state is concerned for how much we spend on the materials budget. So the $10,000 cut does not put into jeopardy any of our state aid funding that we get. So if we had further cuts, then that would be a different story. But this year, this is okay. I don't like to say that, but this is okay. So that, and then just a little snapshot. This is our circulation that we've had over the last 3 fiscal years, and as you can see, like obviously after the pandemic, we went from, there was a big jump up. This isn't even reflecting all the big jump anymore, but we're still going up, which is not the case in all libraries, actually, and we actually circulate, we're the 6th highest circulation in our consortium, which is really good. I was surprised when I dug into the numbers to find that out, so we're doing actually really, really well. Hi, Corey. This is Corey Ryan, one of my other trustees. Sneak on over.
Pardon my lateness.
That's okay. We just started. But so this is just a good indication that the library is still doing really well and that we're still attracting people and we're still circulating more and more as we go. So that's actually really great news. And then I just added on this fun slide of some new things that we're doing at the library that we've added. So we have Historical Fiction Book Club. We just added an adult Lego club. So if anybody likes to do Legos and you're a grown-up, then we've got that for you now as well. We also have added like several teen programs this year, Baby Sensory Group, our ESL Conversation Circle that we'd added. Come on in, Charles. Look at all my trustees are coming in. Charles Desmond, Dr. Charles Desmond, also coming in, coming in hot. So everyone's ruining my flow, though. Oh, there we go. But our ESL Conversation Circle, actually, we just are also bringing over to one of the motels or hotels where we have our new families that have come to town to help out with English language acquisition. So we're expanding that as an outreach program over there to help out. And we're adding more world languages collections. Our Library of Things, of course, is always popular. And so this year we added some VR headsets, some board games, paper shredder, a weaving loom. I've got some other things on hold for that, like microscope and stuff like that. The Children's Piazza we added to the museum passes, which is thanks to the Friends of the Library and the Wenham Museum. And we just are adding right now the Cape Ann Museum as well. We got a state grant, the Access for All grant, which is pigeonholed to go towards monies to improving our services for the deaf and hard of hearing community. So we're buying, at this point, we've bought some new technology to help amplify so that people can communicate with us better. We'll be doing some training this spring as well for staff to be able to learn better communications lessons, some ASL, and then we'll be doing, it's a 2-year grant, so next year we'll be doing some programming with that grant as well, like having some ASL translators, some CART translation, things like that as well for that population to try to improve that as well. We have a brand new website this year as well. And if you haven't been in the library lately and haven't been to the children's room, we have a brand new colorful mural. It covers like the whole back wall. It's multicultural. It tries to have world stories on it. That's fantastic. We raised money separately to fund that too. So that's the library in a little nutshell. Do I have any questions, comments, thoughts?
Arthur?
No questions. The increase certainly is reasonable. It's a reasonable budget, and you seem to be okay with it, so.
Okay for,
So if
for
you're,
now.
if you're okay, I'm okay.
Can you just elaborate on the state,
State aid.
yeah, what's the what's the
So the
calculus
requirements
again?
for state aid, there's actually a bunch of them, but the main ones is that 13% of our overall budget gets spent on materials. It's all based on your population size as well. And also due to our population size, we have to be open a certain amount of hours. We have to be open 59 hours a week, including some nights and weekend hours. Those are like the two big requirements for it. And then it's also you're supposed to be having your budget increase by 2.5% every year. That's like basically the rubric for it. And then there's some other little pieces like that, like you have to be open to everybody and things like that. But those are the big three things.
That's it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
No questions, but we are frequent users, especially of
Yay.
the children's library, so thank you and keep it up.
Yep, welcome.
Walter? Paul? Eric?
Again, wonderful job. I've always had this question about the children's garden area outside.
Oh, yes, what about it?
Go.
What's your question?
Well, I always see it, but I don't know, maybe I'm not going there when the flowers are blooming, because I'm wondering.
There aren't like a ton of flowers there, I have to say. The garden club actually
Yes.
maintains it, so, I don't think they put a lot in that is gonna be eagerly picked by the children. So much, there's a lot more perennial things in there as well,
Understood.
yeah.
But the mural in the children's room, we use it all the time.
Oh,
It's
yeah, isn't it
fantastic.
gorgeous? It's so nice, yeah.
Mike?
So can we go back to the increases, the annual increases, just because,
Oh, this one?
yes,
Yeah.
which is great. What do you attribute that to predominantly? Is this a combination of things, increased
Well, what
Danvers
I'll,
usage?
yeah, so I'll say that we have really increased, what I actually attribute it to, it's like hard to have like a real known metric for sure, but we have so much more programming now that we've introduced, so between children's and teen and adult programming, that just brings more people in the door. And also our community outreach librarian, she services multiple of the, so Charter and like Brentwood and those places, and like home delivery for people too, so she's got at least 50 people there that she's bringing like 10 books to at a time every month as well. So we've really expanded our services and our programs a lot, and that just brings more people in the door, and then more books and materials go out the door.
Great, keep up the good work, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Great budget. Question about the consortium. Is that Noble?
Yes.
And you said that you're the 6th highest in terms of circulation in Noble?
Yep.
How many communities are in Noble?
So there's 25, I think that's right, is there 25 libraries? I think it's correct, there's
Okay.
25 libraries, which also, Noble's unusual because it has some academic libraries in there as well, too. But yeah, we're behind, we're almost exactly equal with Melrose. And Salem, we're like fighting them for like right there. But like Reading and Wakefield are the ones that have like, are really booming with, and Beverly, really booming with their numbers. And then we're just like in that little tie with Melrose and Salem as well. But yeah, we do a lot better than a lot of like Revere, Everett, Lynn. Like we circulate far more than they do, which I was surprised because they're cities too. So expect more, but.
And then in terms of state aid, what number can you predict?
So generally, we get back around $45,000 a year. So it's been around there. Like this past year was like a little higher because they had still money that they were handing out. So things are evening out again in the state, as we know. So I wouldn't expect to have like a higher number than that anymore. But as long as we're meeting our goals, like we'll be fine. If we don't meet our goals, then their standards that are set, then we apply for a waiver for this from the state, and then they give you a percentage less of the state aid. So they'd only give you maybe 75%, depending on which goal areas that you're under, the standards that you're under. But we're going to meet the goals this year. That won't be a problem. It would only be if there are further budget cuts in the future that we wouldn't meet them.
And then my perennial question is always about the George Peabody Trust.
Yes.
How's that doing? What's the balance, and how much are you using
That
annually?
is a good question. So we're getting closer to 600,000 again, right? Like we're just under, right? well, society and what, yeah, that's right. So, yeah, so it's just the, it's the, like, yeah, they merged the two trusts into one. So there's, yeah, so it's just under 600,000 right now. So it took the dip when there was the big hit, of course, and now it's been working its way back up again. And of course, the trustees every year give us a percentage of money, like usually around $20,000, like that helps fund our programming and like some other things like that as well. And then, you know, we can always make extra requests of them as needed, which we do sometimes. And so we use our professional development funds all come out of the trust as well. So that's been another good positive for us.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
Move the budget.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right.
Oh, well, then you guys are excused.
I'll grab my coat.
That's how you get great attendance, right? You double your meetings up.
After this, there'll be empty.
Everyone's gone.
Go ahead.
You're not a member of the committee, so you don't have privileges of a point of order. But if you have a question, I'm certainly happy to recognize you.
I would assume as an elected town meeting member, I would be able to bring up a point of order, but I'll defer to the chairman's knowledge. Could we have one more row of lights, please, so that we can see what we're doing?
Of course.
I think it's either all or nothing at this point.
I would describe it as a custodial question. would be that.
See, remember when I was practicing?
We're here to
before we
serve.
started this?
I'd like to think so.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Robin Doherty, the chair of the school committee. So I want to recognize before we begin our presentation that we are definitely asking for a significant increase than we have in future years. It is a total of a 6.4% increase, which totals $51,990,348. And Dan will go more into that in a minute. But really, first, I want to also thank the town and the town's guidance as we really work together to come up with this budget. Mostly this increase is due to, and we've talked a lot about this over the past couple years, really building in-district special ed programs so that we can obviously keep the kids in their home community. And then as years go on, it'll obviously defer the cost with out-of-district placement. So that's really where the bulk of our increase will be focused on. So, over to Superintendent Bauer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening.
Dan, welcome.
Thank you so much. Great. Okay. Ready? Thank you. I'll introduce Pam Crum, our business manager, who's been outstanding throughout this whole process, and also Eric Crane, a school committee member, who's been helpful as well. And just want to thank the school committee for their support, as this is my first go-around putting together a budget, but had the good fortune of seeing how things worked last spring, and also want to echo the appreciation to the town for working closely with us throughout the course of the year. And also want to thank the town for helping us with a specific goal in mind as we started the year off in terms of looking at ways we can improve our special education programming. Again, as Robin said, to keep our students here, and also at the point to sustain our budget, but also improve our services. And I really appreciate that piece. We spent a lot of time, and you'll see that woven throughout the presentation. So one of our goals certainly was to maintain level services for our students and staff. And really, this whole budget was a collaborative piece with our principals, our directors, and where we're at today wasn't where we began way back in November and December. So appreciate all the work, the give and take to get to where we're at, because we do want to be as responsible as we can and understand and appreciate, the responsibility that we have. So our priorities really were to improve special education programming, and also the changing needs of our students, knowing that many positions have been funded by ESSER, and I think that the school department last year did a good job moving some into the operating, and then we also have come to the point where ESSER was running out this year, so we know that we have decisions to make in terms of what we can move over to operation and what we cannot. But also, I think the important piece is that life has changed somewhat in our schools after the pandemic, and we need to address those, and we're working really hard for that. But also to continue to support the innovative programming that's occurring in our high school, and as well as looking for ways to improve academic achievement. That's huge. So this all aligns with a district improvement plan in terms of creating a safe and supportive learning environment, as well as a coherent curriculum, instruction, and assessment. So, next, please. I won't belabor the point, but certainly we all have pressures, and the Chapter 70 funding, we received a considerable amount less this year, but that's all due to decreasing inflation, which is a big factor in the formula. That was capped at a 4.5%, and it exceeded that over, I think, the last 2 years. Good news, the inflation rate is down, but that is a big mover and shaker in terms of the funding. So it's not just Danvers, but many other communities have faced less Chapter 70 funding. The good news is that we did increase our enrollment, which is outstanding. So that helps in terms of going from a basic to a foundation budget and fewer attending Essex Tech. Again, it's not a competition with Essex Tech, but the more students we can retain, that does help us financially. Also, we know that ESSER is coming to an end in September, and we're really working hard on the out-of-district placements in terms of being able to limit that piece. But we also know that we're faced with increasing tuition costs and transportation costs, and knowing that the consortium, which we send a number of our students there for out-of-district placements, they're facing a major HVAC project, which has all of our 20 members are faced with a budget increase there with tuition. Transportation costs, as we know, are increasing, but there is some good news in terms of our planning. Hopefully, we have a good idea with that. Curricular needs, contractual obligations, we're negotiating with our 4 units. In fact, we just had our negotiation today with our teacher instructional assistants, our teacher aides, but also the inflationary pressures that we all feel. So I think the big thing coming into the year, and again, so appreciative of having a target, looking for ways that we can hopefully flatten the curve with special education costs, knowing that the tuitions are increasing, transportation, and really faced with, that's why we're sitting before you with an increased budget. We're looking for ways to improve our programming to keep kids in district as best as we can, and feel that we need to address this. Waiting is really not an option, knowing that if we can't put pieces into our budget that improve our programming, sustainability next year may be a very different conversation. Again, there's no guarantees, but we need to take action. So we really took a deep dive into our resources, looking at our salaried positions, knowing that ESSER is ending, how can we reallocate positions when attrition is there in terms of retirements or people moving on, how can we move and collapse positions, which we have, and really looking very closely at our budget lines. As we know, the major part of our budget is personnel, not as much paper, pencils, and all those materials, but again, looking at lines maybe that aren't utilized as much and making moves there. But also knowing that we have overages with retirements, that certainly the adage is somebody going out high, you bring in somebody with less salary. So looking for savings there. Knowing our funding's ending with ESSER, knowing that the district did a good job last year reducing, but knowing we have that facing this year. And also, can we defer our one-time costs with ESSER fundings that are remaining? And we've looked to do that, and we are doing that. And really taking a good hard look at those one-time purchases as much as we can move over to save room. And transportation costs, are increasing, but the good news is that the town has really been outstanding in the cooperation support. We've acquired 2 vans that we can utilize for extracurricular activities, athletics, which that may not sound much, but it's huge because now you can transport maybe a smaller team, a smaller group. In fact, Mary Wormers, the assistant super, is actually transporting students tonight for an open house, but that means we do not have to, charter a bus, which adds up. So that has been huge. Adding 2 more 7D vans, we need more drivers, so if you know anybody that's looking for a driver, please let us know. But I think the big thing, too, at the bottom is we're all facing out-of-district transportation costs, and the good news is that there's a collaborative effort within the North Shore Consortium. Other districts are looking for ways where we can collaborate and share resources for transportation. So there is a plan on the board right now, and we'll find out more in May in terms of where this goes, but feel very strongly and confident that more than likely one of the districts will take the lead in this. Although not successful in acquiring a state grant, we've all decided we need to do this. And it received a lot of support in the last board meeting, where if we can regionalize our transportation, take a year to examine, where our students are going, how many vehicles are needed and looking at all the districts, how can we maximize that, then in a year after that, fully utilize collaboration with other districts and towns. So, i.e., if you have 2 or 3 students, if they, from different districts, going to the same destination, if it fits along the path, obviously condensing down how many vehicles are needed. They're anticipating a 10% savings, maybe more, but we're optimistic with that. I think the bottom line is everybody's faced with this, and the collaboration, I think, is really important. So I put up some slides in terms of the high school, because I know the high school, the narrative that I heard coming in is that obviously you have the larger school, there has been decline in enrollment, being able to move and shake positions, but the high school is stabilizing. We've seen better retention. The numbers have gone up in terms of enrollment. But really, to maintain our programming, to keep us competitive, we need the staff to do that. So feeling this year, you know, making a substantive change there, I think would not be a good move in that case. I mean, we offer 20 advanced placement classes, which I think that really is attractive. And I know, not to point out Mike, but he presented not long ago at our school committee in terms of the update, knowing where we offer, you know, a high-level courses that maybe you can't take at other places. And I think that makes us, you know, I think very competitive. We have 2 innovative pathways. We are getting, it hasn't been released formally yet, but I can tell you that we've applied for a 3rd, and without really revealing too much, it looks promising that that will occur, and that's a pretty large grant, and that would be environmental science, which I think, again, that's programming that students are looking for. Performing arts are strong, early college, and again, our special education programming where, you know, again, it's more about keeping students in, but we have seen some students come back at the high school, which I think is important to note. Again, not to beleaguer the point too much, but, and this slide was shared last year, but just to show you that we have a number of innovative courses and classes, and certainly the AP classes, they match with the pathways that we feel are important to keep us competitive. Something to consider too is that, you know, we've applied for a good deal of grants. We'll continue to do that, things that are not in the budget but do support the work, such as the acceleration grant that we tie in with our math curriculum and support. Our 1-8 discovery program, which has allowed our high school team to travel to different schools to look at innovative practices. They went to Washington, D.C. about 2 weeks ago to look at some innovative practices and try to bring that back to our school as we meld the pathways and improve them. So it's a substantial amount of money, and we'll continue to apply for those grants. Then also it's worth noting that our emergency assistance program for our new students is separate, and it's not in our budget because we are receiving state aid for that. So for each student that is new, school of origin to us, we've received $1,000 per student. In addition, we receive $104 per day per student. We received allocations. We received 1 large allocation right around December. I'm sorry, I looked at Pam. She's our expert.
We've received 1 payment so far from the state
Right.
based on data that was submitted on our October report or the December one.
Correct.
I think we had to submit 1 round of data in December and we got a payment in early 2024. Then we had another submission around March 1st and we were expecting a second payment in May.
Exactly. So that money has allowed us to hire more help with the programming in terms of English language teachers, teacher aides, instructional support, social worker. That's allowed us to hire them, and that the good news is with that grant, that funding, we can carry over to next year, which is not spent this year. And what every superintendent in the state is asking that has students from the emergency assistance, what about the funding for next year, right? So Sally Cairns and Joan Lovely attended our last school committee meeting, and they're certainly big advocates for continued funding. You know, the budget's still moving its way through the state, but they understand the pressures that not only our community but other communities have felt, and the funding is essential so we can provide supports to help us in our district. So I think that's important to note, and they're working really hard. We have weekly calls with DESE and the other entities just to support the program. Strategic planning, we have ended our strategic plan. Actually, it ended last year, right before it began, so we'll be working on this later this spring. I'll present my entry findings to the school committee next month, and then we'll start to build our strategic plan long term. But again, I can't see things changing in terms of the safe and supportive environment, but we need the feedback from our stakeholders, engage students, improving academic performance, and again, stabilizing special education. I'm sure will be big factors in that. And again, looking at our special education programming, we took a deep dive this year into how can we improve existing programs with the look to reduce out-of-district placements, particularly in 3 strands: our autism spectrum disorder, therapeutic, and language-based, and also looking at ways we can save with transportation. I talked about the regionalization of transportation, which is important, and also reallocation of staffing when possible. We've actually have begun and we're approved to reorganize our student services department to streamline, because it's important that we maximize the resources. So we went from 6 admin to 5 in order to streamline, but not in the way of being effective. So our special education programming overall, this top part of the slide was presented earlier this year, which indicates the 3 programs we've targeted that are existing, that we have, and just broke down the cost per student average with transportation. And looking at that piece, and investment's really a tough thing to say when you're talking human lives, but knowing for a fact that, you know, if you look at what is the return, those were the estimates there based upon the investment of the $432,000 and on down the road to language-based for a total of $1.2 million. We knew coming in with the ESSER positions and knowing where we're at in terms of our obligations to special education, contractual obligations, there's no way we could bring this forward, nor should we, because there's still a lot of work we are doing. But knowing that if we take a partial part of that proposal and really maximize, particularly more in the areas of the ASD and therapeutic, we reduced our ask, but knowing that with good planning and hopefully good return, hopefully we'll be able to utilize any savings over the long haul to bring back and reinvest, to reallocate and move along a 2- and 3-year plan to improve those programs. So I think that's important to understand, is the goal really is to retain. I've seen the investment we've made this year in terms of some of the positions we did move over from ESSER to help us prevent out-of-district placements. Again, it's to provide services here for our students to stay. If things go well, which we hope, we know that the investment may not be immediate, and I think that's important to note. However, if things go well, you know, we feel in time, as we are able to build, improvements will be seen. So next slide. Oh, thank you. So just a thumbnail sketch of what we're looking to do in terms of the ESSER positions. So a number of these positions are critical. The instructional technician is very important in special education, although it's under ESSER. A lot of these bleed together, to be honest with you. The hall monitor is important because that really is able to help stabilize the school. The opportunity room, which is the middle school, which we know the middle school really is coming in as an area that needs a lot of attention, and that allows students that are dysregulated to be able to go and refocus so they can continue the day and get what they need and be less of a distraction. And a special education coordinator, unfortunately or fortunately, it depends on how you look at it, 2 are on ESSER. I know that I couldn't bring forth 2. And that's where we got into that reorganization of the leadership model from 6 to 5, because I'd rather have positions face students as much as possible, but knowing there's a point where you need the administrative support to keep the programming going. So that's why 1 as opposed to 2 went. And there were other positions we know that we couldn't bring forth, and we've started to have those discussions with those individuals. But we also look for ways, can we collapse positions, move things around? So to add a math interventionist coach at the middle school, we collapsed and moved some things around. A reading specialist, we can apply Title I funding. On the other side with special education, the BCBA, which is the board certified behavior analyst, is one that goes in and provides behavior plans for students, that they work with staff to provide supports and interventions to help students maintain their day. We only had 2 when I arrived. Now we actually looking to add and utilizing contracted services, which we have a pretty large number we're using for the high school. If we can converse and just move that over to a position, that will help us greatly, and we're doing that. But a lot of the special ed positions that we've been able to move around, we've actually have collapsed a number of the aid positions that were unfilled to maximize. We look at it that way. Can we get more, I hate to say bang for the buck, but in a lot of ways it is, where you can really get some immediate help with a social worker or a special educator. Also, we are looking to develop our language-based program, which would compete with Landmark at some point, not now, but we also, looking inwards, do we have a teacher that's certified that has the proper, that we can make a move, and that's something we're working on as well, so we can develop that but not expend, just do a reallocation. I think that's important to note. So just breaking down our proposed increases, and I'll show the offsets too. Obviously, the non-salary piece with out-of-district tuition, transportation is substantial. The non-salary requests, again, those are usually a smaller part of your budget. Looking for that with some new curriculum materials. Our special education programming requests and our ESSER positions to move over, as well as our contractual obligations across all of our units. So it's a substantial amount for sure. But when you look at the offsets, you went one too fast. Thank you. So circuit breaker, we know in order to, we need to take a bigger piece of the circuit breaker this year in order to bring down our ask. We just know we need to. We worked closely with the town to look at this, and knowing, you know, the reserves, obviously for rainy days, you want to not work it down too far because you may need it. It's not intended to be sustained over a long period of time, but we know we need to make this investment. We're willing to do that. Deferrals to ESSER, we have a number of the one-time purchases we're going to move over. Increase the pre-K tuition. We've had a review of our pre-K programming. Good news. It's a great program, but we also have room to grow and improve there. So part of the increase will be a tuition, but also we have capacity to take more students. So we haven't been marketing or pushing the programming and knowing that it's really a great deal and a great hidden gem, as they may say, in our program. And that's staffed by special educators, certified teachers. They get all the services. It's a great program. Transportation, we projected a lower rate this year because of the drop in inflation. We've analyzed that. In staffing, we know we have overages with retirements and collapsing unfilled positions. We really, I believe, only have 6 retirements at this time. Yeah, so it's a low number that you might face, which is good news, but it's a lower number because that overage, again, allows a cushion as well. So when you bring all that together, that's our fancy pie chart that just breaks down the overall ask. And as we know, the majority of our funding goes towards salaries, which is not atypical of a school budget. And also, too, our per pupil expenditures has been below the state. So I would say that our town does support our education in a strong way because we make up the difference. And I feel very supported throughout the year, and certainly coming in last year and seeing that support. So all told, last slide, you know, with our increase in offsets, it's a $3.1 million increase, which is a 6.41 increase, which we know is substantially higher than it's been over the last 15 years. I think the last rate that was this high might have been 2008, which was a 5.9%. But, and I certainly know, you know, there's a large responsibility on our end to ensure that, you know, once we're able to finalize and if we can move forward, it's incumbent on us to ensure that the programs that we're improving, that happens with Fidelity, and look for ways we can currently improve and improve in the future, as we can maximize our funding as much as possible to be responsible. So we know there's a lot of pressure on us, but we know that there would be even more pressure if we're not able to contain or at least stabilize our budget, because, you know, the areas that we talked about in terms of the great programs we have and to keep us competitive, you know, that, you know, just knowing a year from now, you know, it might be a different tune, and hopefully things will work out well. But we put a lot of thought and planning into this. So as you can see, we went to a smaller ask off the special education because we know we need to move it forward. And I'm really proud of our team. They put a lot of time into this, but the effort's still ongoing. So we will have a new director of student services, and I'm very excited about that and the direction we're heading, but we still have a lot of work to do. So I hope I didn't talk too fast or too long, but happy to take any questions.
Just right.
Right. Well, I didn't get the Oscar music over there, but I do need a drink of water. Or iced coffee. No.
But we have candy if you'd like a piece of candy.
Depends what comes.
Bill, you can't have any today. Mr. Landers.
First, I'd like to welcome Dan. I think this is the first time that Dan's been appeared before us, and I think he's, from what I can see, he's done an absolutely fantastic job so far. I think that we probably all see the sort of a little bit more bounce in the step of people when it comes to the schools, and I think that's really important. And I don't think there's anything that we do as a community that's more important than the education of these kids. And it's critical that we support the school department when they come in with reasonable requests and when they make an effort to be able to develop what I would describe as a very reasonable budget, both internally from their standpoint, but also externally in terms of the work that they do with the general government side of it. Again, towns are based, whether people want to believe it or not, they are based almost exclusively on the quality of their school system. And I right now have tremendous amount of confidence that Dan's going to be able to lead the school system into a really great place going forward. In regards to this particular budget, I agree. I wish we could have found a way to meet all of those special ed needs that we talked about earlier on in the year. I think that when you look at this particular budget and you look at what are the drivers, and obviously increases in staff costs are always going to be a driver when you have that type of number, percentage number is a part of your budget. But the special ed situation is very difficult in terms of the fact that if we can bring those kids back, if we can do a great job of educating those kids in Danvers, which I think we can, then that's going to allow the entire school to flourish in so many, the entire system to flourish in so many ways. So I think that supporting that effort within this budget is critical for us as well. And when you look outside of that, when you look at the budget, yeah, it's 6.4%, but you sort of wonder, how could you get lower realistically? I think if you look at this and you want to just make haphazard cuts and believe that somehow you can just, wave a magic wand and say you get 4% and that's it. It's not going to work. It's not going to benefit the kids, and that's not going to benefit the town in any way, shape, or form. So I really appreciate what you've done, and I'm certainly in support of this budget. And I think the other part of this too is that, listen, you came into this town with a lot of expectations upon you. It's our job to be able to provide you the support, and that support means to support you when it comes to this type of a budget, and to give you the chance to be able to make that system really succeed. There is one question that I have pretty much every year, and you probably won't be able to answer it tonight, but I will expect that you get back to me, and that is, why do boys and girls lacrosse pay the same fee as hockey and football and swimming? I know why they pay more, because they're more expensive sports. I have never been told why lacrosse is in that same category with where we have outplacements or out costs in terms of rentals. So if you can come back with that answer, you will become my all-time favorite superintendent. And of course, if you come back next year with it being the same as others, you'll go past Steve and you'll be my all-time favorite administrator. So
This is reminiscent of the time he asked about cat licenses.
Poor Peter looked at me with horror when I said it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Eric?
I have a few questions. The time for statements got sucked up, so I won't say much there. About 5 or so questions. One, you talked about enrollment strategies, and you mentioned staffing. Can you say a few words or thoughts that you have had to date on enrollment strategies other than staffing? So once you have the staffing, then what kind of thoughts are you thinking? Because I know across the Commonwealth, superintendents have, this is not an uncommon conversation.
It's not an uncommon conversation, and as we know, the demographics are shifting. So I think it's really important that we look at a number, what are the controllables in our area, such as the existing programming. So hats off, and I can't take credit for this. This was all running before I arrived in terms of Mary Wormers and her direction with the high school staff for the innovative pathways, which they had, but not at the depth that they're developing now. And also helpful for that 1-8 foundation work, which is coming back in terms of looking for further ways we can create more innovative practices. I think the transitional planning is critical because in terms of working, and we had a group of 8th graders up today, We need to be able to have with confidence that we are an outstanding option for our students here in town, and have that piece where I like what Mike said in terms of bounce. I'm glad to hear that, because I do see that at the high school, and we're starting to see that at the middle school, because confidence is a big piece that you play with that. But I also think, too, that part about academic achievement, we can do a better job, I think, selling that, because we know that we have students going to outstanding universities, and it's a product not just of the high school, but the whole continuum. So I think we need to do a better job in that area of promoting that piece, because, you know, families, I don't think they're making decisions in the 8th grade year when looking to the high school or not. I think it's more when they're entering the middle school, and although there may be an option for some, maybe not others, they're thinking about that. So it also looks for vertical alignment within the middle school. What can we do to vertically align the middle to the high school in terms of pathways? And that's one area that we're looking to improve in terms of the computer science and programming this year at the middle school, and that's part of our positioning and some of our moves. And how can we align better with that? And also, there's been more outreach with the middle to the elementary. We have a new middle school principal, and he's really hit the ground running. But there's a lot of work with that. But certainly, those are some strategies that we need to employ and do a better job. We need to promote ourselves more, right? We have outstanding educators. We have great opportunities, but we can do a better job in that area.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned promotion. I don't have to, you know, ask my perpetual question, which is along those lines, and so I appreciate you saying that. Can you mentioned high school to middle school. Can you just talk about your pre-K strategies, kind of where your thoughts are there, which is one of the driving ways that superintendents are looking at address enrollment stuff?
Right, so we know that I believe we have 18 open seats at this time, you know, and knowing that that's opportunity, because we feel we have a great product where we have certified licensed teachers, and we also offer other services. We have special education, we integrate the pre-K, and we're looking to actually consolidate that this year. So we've already made a move to next year have all of our pre-K located at Riverside School. And part of our work with consolidating is moving our programming so that we can share resources. But, you know, right off the bat, if you look at our webpage, what is there on pre-K? You know, and I'm not saying that the webpage is the end-all and be-all. So we are currently, I have a meeting tomorrow with our pre-K coordinator. I'm spending the day at Riverside, because we're looking at other creative ways we can market and let people know we have a great option. And we have to be very mindful in terms of an increase to tuition as well. We don't want to outprice ourselves in the area, but even with the proposal that we made Monday, we're going to go back to the drawing board to create more of a tiered approach, because we have people in. We know that, you know, budgets are tight, but we also know where our comparables are within the region. We know that we certainly are less expensive than the private entities, and we need to get that word out there more. And that was clear in our audit.
Awesome. So then, on page A7, just a couple specific questions on a few lines. I think the increases to the special ed teachers is self-explanatory. Yep. I had just two questions about what team chairs are, because you had a significant increase there. And then the other question is just on the management reserve. So that's page A7 in the budget summary.
I'll get to that, A7. That's why Pam is here, because you found it before I did.
I did. So what was, I'm sorry, the management reserve was one question. What was the other question?
Team chairs.
So team chairs at the,
Those are our special ed coordinators.
those are special
Okay.
ed coordinators. But
Speaks for itself.
yes. So there are different terms for that. So there was a reorg before I arrived where they went to more of a coordinator model. We're really not able to move over all those from ESSER into there, which is the reality, but we reorged that. Would we like to get there someday where we have more building-based? At some point, yes.
I certainly understand and respect the approach that you're taking with respect to in-district services, so it speaks for itself. So once I just didn't know what the term stood for. You don't really have to say much more than that. You know, I certainly support division. My last question, just management reserve.
So right in a
If you say special education, I'll go, okay.
in a negotiation year where we have not settled contracts.
Pam, can you just go to the microphone so that folks at home can, thank you.
So I think historically, management reserve has some planned increases for non-union salary personnel, and we know that we're going to have so many teachers that move across the salary scale, so we build in a factor based on historical data that is going to account for that, but it's not identified with particular staff members at the time that the budget is formed.
Understood.
So that's typically what management reserve kind of contains in it. If we might know that we're going to need to increase the rate that we pay our daily subs or things like that, that money can kind of sit there until we see where the market is going on those things. In this particular year, we are undergoing negotiations with 3 of our units, and we don't know where those contracts are going to settle.
Understood.
So we had to plan for something, and we did that. In that line is kind of where that planning kind of lives.
Got it. Absolutely.
Along with those other things that I had also mentioned that also are still in the management reserve line.
And I believe the last time we were doing contract negotiations, I think it was done in a similar way. Yeah.
Prepare to have that ready to go.
Yes, that is the way I was schooled to do it, I guess, by my predecessor.
I think that's fair to say. It's always been like that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. No more questions.
Paul?
Good evening, Superintendent.
Good evening,
Bauer,
Coach.
thank you for coming. I thought the budget was well thought out. Everything that Mike said, I would echo, except for the lacrosse question. However, I had just a couple of questions that over the years. First one is on page A6, I believe it is. I'm not sure where it is. It's end of plan assessments and achievement metrics. I'm not,
Oh, right.
A6.
Yep, A6, strategic plan, metrics. So we're at the end where, looking at the metrics in terms of where the students are, in terms of the reading ability, MCAS testing and such, and that's where we're at now. And we tied a lot of our district improvement plan this year, which we basically held tight with the previous ones. And those metrics, that's what we measure, like the outcome of the MCAS testing, as well as other testing mechanisms.
Right. Now, that's part of is this part of the 5-year plan that
Yes,
is ending?
that's it. It has ended, yes.
Yes, okay.
So
Now,
we need to develop a new one.
yes, and I looked back on last year's budget booklet, and it was, the metrics were obviously the same. And the question I had was, a couple of years even prior to that, is I don't have a problem with grade 5, 60%, things like that. But if you're going to go through a new 5-year plan, and if you've met the goals, and I don't know whether you have or not met these specific goals, but let's say you have, then I would hope that the metric and the expectation would increase from 60%, let's say. So you set the goal a little higher.
Yes.
After all, you're setting goals, and why would we stay at 60% if we think we have the people to bring that up to a 65 or 70% expectation at the end of a certain grade level? That's just a suggestion. It's not criticism of any kind, but I would like to see the goal, reach for the goal a little bit more. Let's say if we can do it, And the next question would be, I was thrilled to hear you talk about regionalization of transportation, because it came up just prior to you talking in my own mind. I was wondering if there was any possibility, not to the extent of a regionalized school or what Essex Tech does or all the regional schools, but if there's a way that you get some kind of a consortium or agreement with different surrounding towns that could improve. I wholeheartedly support that effort. And I believe that's where you're heading to some extent.
Yes.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Now, on the school enrollments, I would say, if you go to Appendix E1 and E2. Let's just stay on E1.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the enrollments, and right now, Highlands is 380, if those are the numbers, right? 380. Next is Smith, 369. Now, Steve would have to help me. The new Smith School was 425 or 450 or somewhere in that neighborhood.
A little more than that, yes.
Yeah, so we're trying to get more of an enrollment in that school, obviously, and we're doing better, because I think a couple of years ago, we're still hanging around 300, which was the original, you know, what it was, when it was jam-packed. And then Thorpe is at 347, and I imagine they're pretty tight, too. So we're still working to get more to Smith, and I guess my question is, not only to you, Dan, but to the school committee. Where are we on trying to get that Smith enrollment up? In other words, I want to use the word that I use every year, sort of redistricting. I know you, I can see Eric flinching right now.
you bring up-
Because it's a touchy subject when you get into the who's moving where and who's going to have to move. So that's just a concern of mine, because I was involved with the school, and I know what the school's total population can hold, Smith School, being Smith School.
So I'm happy to address that.
Yes.
I know coming in, part of the other goal was to look at class size and what can we do to balance as best that we can. You know, ideally, in a perfect world, to have balanced across the board. And there are, certainly Highlands is, you know, at capacity. There's really no available room, and certainly Thorpe is too. With the mind going in, we were looking at initially, how can we start adding classes to Smith to push that along and look at our flex zones and start pushing the students from Highlands to Great Oak into Smith. So part of our initial plan was to start adding the kindergarten there next year. We put a quick pause on that for a major reason. So we also found that our special education services and our specialized programming that are housed at Thorpe, Riverside, Smith, and Great Oak, there's none that could be placed at Highlands because they're jam-packed. We're moving quite a few programming to Smith next year. That will boost it up, but we know that that is a high-needs population. So we're careful on that piece, and instead of a kindergarten teacher moving the programs, we thought it would be best just to take a pause this year on that part, because we will have increased enrollment. I don't have that specific number in front of me, but I can get that for you. But knowing that you're going to have a higher group of needs in there, we have the staffing, we'll move that around. So we were careful with that piece, because we're going to consolidate, you know, the learning center population at Smith, which is our autism strand, and we have two levels. We have the intensive learning center that's at Thorpe and the learning center at Riverside. We're making those moves over to Smith because it is a better facility for, and we're able to make adjustments to the actual not building, but we can make some adjustments in the classroom to provide implements that will help the students. And then from there, look to see where that is and then move forward with that, but also looking, how can we move the classes down with the flex? And we're still looking at that. We have to be very careful because of our kindergarten numbers where they're at. So we defer as much as we can because there is more capacity, but knowing with the higher needs population making that transition. And it's going to be a tiered approach. The teacher spoke loudly and clearly that they'd like to keep their cohort that are moving to grade 5 that would be going to Thorpe. They want to hold on to them another year, and we feel like we want them to complete that. But that is big on our mind, is how can we look to balance as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. And the other thing that you mentioned, I think you said pre-K tuition was going up slightly? Would that endanger families at some point if their income couldn't handle it? And if it does, is there a resolution to that type of problem?
There is, and we're working on that because we're looking, and we actually utilize, there's not a formal policy right now on that, but we did help a little bit this year with some cases that came to us. Trying to create, we're creating that verbiage right now to bring back to school committee on the 29th, because we do agree that, you know, just like there are ways to provide the ability to help families for, you know, you mentioned the lacrosse and other fees like that. We do have mechanisms at the high school, but we need to have that in place where we can provide support, particularly if families are free and reduced, and we could work with that piece. We have to do that.
Right.
So that's why we're looking at a tiered approach as well, which was well taken, feedback from the school committee, because knowing that although we still will be below what some of our comparables will be, any increase is still an increase. Right, and we have to be very mindful that we have, you know, students entering from 3 to 4 years old, making that transition, and we want to be as equitable as possible.
Thank you. And lastly, fees. All right, just a quick question. Have they remained stable over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years? have there, I'm not talking about athletic fees, but transportation fees, activities, clubs, et cetera. Have they been sort of stable? You haven't been here, but maybe if you look back, I think they have been. I just wanted to double check.
I'd have to go back and do more research if you want me to go behind, more than 10 years back.
Well,
But
before- yeah.
I've been 10 or 11 years in the district, and they have, working in the district, and I was a parent before that, and they haven't changed in that time.
That's all I have to know. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
But I can tell you, the pre-K hasn't been increased in over 15 years.
The tuition?
That's correct.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Solly?
Actually, I'm good, but thank you for all of your efforts. I'm going to let Ellen run on her questions.
Hi. Yeah, so I came from a school event tonight, and it was great. It was wonderful. So I just want to say everything you're doing in the schools is noticeable and appreciated, and I agree with Mike that people seem to be more positive. I mean, just in general, the support has been wonderful, so thank you. I agree with the overall budget, but I do have some questions. First of all, school psychologists, that's down 6.27%. So I would think services are still required. We're still, what, a year and a half outside of people returning from COVID. What's driving that decrease?
So for school psychologists,
Sorry, line 154 on page A7.
A7 is a popular page.
Yeah, it is.
I should just leave it dog-eared there.
We all have it highlighted.
Yeah. So the A7.
It's where the money is, so.
Yeah, so line, let's see, 154, A7, school psychologists, down.
Oh, and that possibly could be, we do have a little bit of attrition. It's not the number of staff, but there's a
Okay.
little bit of overage there.
Okay, thank
Good
you.
news too, though, if I could interject. We are looking to partner to bring in some practicum students that can certainly take the load off and create a nice pipeline. That should take place next year.
It's good to hear, thank you. Staff development, does that include curriculum training?
Yes.
Okay. So question about curriculum in general is, what is the process approval for, I guess, a curriculum request or buy? What is that process?
So, for example, the elementary has gone
Yeah.
through there's over a course of time where they will come to a point where you reevaluate and evaluate where the curriculum is, and obviously we're changing the EL at the elementary. So you go through a whole model and a trial to look at, what might be the best fit, work with our teachers to come with an adaptation, bring it to a school committee, which we have, and work from there. So
Okay.
there is a cycle on that. And I will tell you, just overall, we need to take a good hard look at that just in general, because the cycle, there should be really a 5-year cycle in all the curriculum, and really it should be synced so that you have your different departments. I know they've done a lot of that, and Mary's really on top of that.
I just noticed, as a parent with children in the school system, I am noticing that there are new curriculum topics that are very new. One in grade 3 is about how Thanksgiving may not be real, right? I'm just wondering, I think our staff needs more training for that. I know that some is optional training and some's mandatory hours. I think that should be mandatory. I think that we should understand, how these messages are getting sent to, grades K through 5 and how it's being received. And I gave grade 3 as an example, but there's a book in grade 5 that talks about how people in the Taliban, are good people. And there's some questions around that, right? And so I just want to, I think understanding the approval process for that would be helpful. And I want to see more training to the staff. Medical supplies is going up 8%. Is that because we're trying to bring more services in-house and capital's required, or what's driving that? So that's line 208.
That may be part of our athletic on that end too.
Okay.
Those costs have gone up, yes.
Okay, thanks. And then student activities down 4.5%. That's line 226. What are we cutting?
I don't believe we're cutting anything. I'm certainly happy to look at that.
Okay.
But that didn't come across the radar as a, substantive cut. That might be an adjustment.
Okay.
But none that I was aware of.
Okay, just as we're talking about, funding for programs and everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I just want to, let's see, there's a couple more questions, and then I'll. Tuition out. So I think I asked this question last year, but it was my first year, and I don't know if I phrased it correctly. For outplacement students, do we have more than one student at the same school?
We do.
Yeah. So when we go to those schools and say these students are returning again, do they expect that we're gonna pay full sticker price for their tuition? Is that their expectation? Or are we able to negotiate the tuition cost for more than one student at a school? I'm just wondering.
No, it's per student.
It's per student. Have we asked? Have we said, are you guys willing to help Danvers, you know, or any other community? Is this, I negotiate for a living every minute of the day, and if you don't ask, you don't know. So I guess my question is, can we ask?
It's a good question. I know it is per student.
Okay.
On that, and I know that typically with an out-of-district placement, you know, there aren't always specific openings.
Yeah.
So there certainly is a high demand and not as much supply.
Okay.
But one thing that can be done is an evaluation of services. So I will tell you just an anecdotal piece. So if you have a student at one outplacement, and then there might be a comparable service that might actually be better, it might actually be a bit less. I think that evaluative piece does happen every year, but we certainly need to make sure we take a good, close look at that.
Okay.
But ultimately, we're obligated to provide the service that the student needs.
Okay.
But in terms of being able to negotiate that, I'm not aware of that. I've never heard of that.
Okay. We can ask.
I'll
If you don't ask, you don't know, right?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Just in general, I just want to say thank you. It's nice to see high school enrollment is up. Let's see, middle school, they had their National Junior Honor Society celebration this year. That hasn't happened in a really long time. You have new principals coming in to elementary school. I just want to see how we can support the aides. I really feel strongly in that. I think that we need to try to, I think teachers and aides should all make more, but I just want to see how we can help everybody within the budget and be reasonable, but I just want to make sure that we can do something about that. I also, as we bring more services over to Smith School, I think we need to be mindful that every class minimum should have one aide, especially as there's more services being introduced to the class. That's more time being taken away from those individual students. And I know some schools might argue that that might not be equitable across maybe the number of students per class, but I think if you look at the services that are going into that specific class, the numbers are going to be higher, and I think those classes could benefit from it more. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Ted?
Let's see. Just to, Dan, you were talking about the staff to support the kids that the state, the refuge, I think it was the refugee families. There's like there's five-ish head counts at the high school that's paid for by the state, that's not in the budget. I just want to make sure I understood that slide correctly.
So, yes.
So there's 67 head counts in the budget. And then there's 4 to 6 other staff members at the high school that are supporting those students. Right. So that's not part of the head count that's in the budget. That's a separate 5 to 6 people.
Right.
That's funded separately. Okay. Yep. Understood. Okay. Yeah. And so is that established that, so you were talking about Sally and Joan, is that established that that will be funded again by the state, or is that still in flux for next year?
Still in flux. It's still in flux, and it's challenging because we know, there are a lot of things that we just don't know in terms of the numbers and where things will go. We believe, and we have a great relationship with Center Board and through DESE, our point person has been outstanding, but things seem to be in terms of stabilized in terms of numbers. But we just don't know where the budget will be next year, but we have to support our students. And again, I think the key is that the funding anything that is left, we know we can roll over to apply that. So we're being as careful as we can, but making sure that we provide as much support as we can too.
So there is a potential that the state doesn't follow through, but we'll have to fund staff going forward out of our budget, kind of like the ESSER funding going away.
Well, and I think that's keeping all of us up at night.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that, right?
Because when I bring that up to Anne Marie at DESE, she says that you're asking the same question that all the other superintendents that are facing that, because again, we want to make sure that we provide great services, and knowing that is important money for us.
Okay. Will the strategic plan address like social media or cell phones at all as part of the plan?
Well, I can't really predict what that's going to be because we're going to bring in stakeholders and we'll develop the vision through our stakeholders and see where that goes in terms of the priorities. But I know that's something that is of concern to many and certainly the Commissioner of Education who's resigned, that was a big push in terms of, that's connected to mental health too.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I could, Mr. Chair, just so, the VOC did this year implement I think it's for the freshmen, a program in which basically when those kids come into school, their phones are put into what amounts to a lockbox, I guess is the best way to pouches, and that they are prohibited from having access to those phones during their time. And it probably would be worthwhile at some point just to see how that, let's piggyback off of them and see how it's worked for them, before we start to really implement something. But there is at least a plan close by in terms of looking at that particular component, which we can look at to see how successful it may have been, so.
If they can do it in ninth grade, we should at least be able to do it in third and fourth grade.
Yeah.
I'm not really kidding. Like, it's a thing. Then, okay, so that covered that. What's the net change in outplacements just by pupils?
The net
this year?
change,
Yeah, like, a lot of years we come in and there's like, hey, there's 5 new ones. Like, that's been at least every other year, we felt like there's been like, hey, there's a surprise 5 new ones. What's the net change in pupil outplacements?
right now, it's hovering where we've actually gone down a couple.
Okay.
So I think it's the upper 60s right now. It was low 70s. But again, I
Right, it could
received
be
an
cha-
email today
Yep,
that there may
it
be.
changed tomorrow, yeah.
Yes, right, and that's what keeps us up at night too.
So there's roughly, like, call it high 60s. Let me get out my phone. So I think we're kind of missing the forest through the trees a little bit here. And the thing that sticks out to me is you don't need to be a historian to know, like, I just looked at what the fiscal year '23 outlay was for out-of-district transportation. It was $600,000. And it went up by $1 million last year, and now it's going up by another $600,000. That's like every expletive I can string together.
Yep.
Insane. And I know it's not any district administrator's fault, but there's something going on there that, like, it doesn't come close to passing the smell test. The regional consortium, I know you were alluded to, like, the hope there is to get 10% cost savings?
Yes.
And so presumably that would be using the same contractor?
It may vary.
Right.
Because they use multiple contractors.
But it wouldn't be actually internalizing the services by the towns?
No,
Like-
that one's specifically geared towards, yes, the
Like-
members of the consortium.
I'm just doing the math here, so it's $2.1 million divided by 180 days is $11,600 per school day, divided by, I call it 68 kids. So that's $170 per kid each way. That, like, that seems insane, and there's gotta be a way for us to do better than that, and it seems to me like it's somebody that found a small line item in every town's budget that's a must-have and a nuisance to do yourself, and somebody's just decided to just take the thing to as high as they possibly can and just seek rent. Like, that's my perception. And I think, like, if you look into the bus companies, it's all owned by the same private equity company. I think we need to do more than, like, the consolidating routes is, obviously that's a logical thing to do, but I think we need to be more aggressive and more drastic about this. Like, there's gotta be ways for us to do it ourselves or to work with other towns in the region to provide the transportation at a more cost-effective manner. I mean, $170 per kid per day, like, that's insane. Like, is there anything in the collective bargaining agreements that prevent us from hiring drivers and paying them? Like, presumably like, if we pay somebody $50 an hour to drive somebody 30 minutes away, does that create problems for us in the district from a collective bargaining standpoint?
No.
So like what, like,
Mr. Chair,
like, go ahead.
Yeah.
on the transportation, I could help out a little bit with that.
Yeah, like this, like, it's the biggest runaway line item in the town right now. It's not even
So-
close. Yeah.
With
And
respect
it's-
to what you're saying, I hear you, and since my company, we run our own transportation, and we partner with school districts in multiple towns in this area. Gloucester Public Schools can barely hold on to their drivers, they just lost their assistant manager of the program. Number of routes are shrinking. Salem consolidated a couple of years ago, and they reduced the radius, they shrunk the radius so they would be able to transport fewer staff. I used to have 12 buses on the road, I have 6 on the road now, I can barely keep a driver. It is a dying industry, and so we are stuck with the monopoly of who is providing it. When you're required to transport folks, you have very few options, and doing it yourself it is as hard to find a driver, 7D or CDL, as it is to find a teacher for a preschool classroom. It is really, really hard. And so we are stuck between a rock and a hard place, to speak for the, speaking for the school department. It is extremely difficult in the transportation industry right now from a staffing perspective, maintenance of vehicles, et cetera. It is a dying resource for folks, and no one has really found a great solution for it. Regionalization sounds phenomenal, and I'm going to talk to
Yeah,
you
no,
soon
it's like,
about it.
it's not, you're like, your educators, they're not even going to your schools. It's, it's like, it's in the school budget, but this is frankly, it's a logistical problem for the town, for every town. Like, we have to solve this. Like, I don't know. I feel like we need to do something. It's like the most obvious way to save money in the whole budget. So I guess I'll stop.
Feel your
And
pain, feel your pain.
I will,
I will, again, I know from the experience, I think the VOTEC once again has gone out and bought predominantly most of their buses and and that's, they sort of try to keep it in-house as best possible. And that was a very expensive outlay to be able to do that. And I agree. I know from, that it's, to keep those individuals, what they really do in that situation is that they just play upon the idea that you are basically a state employee or a government employee. You have they really work on a benefit package with it in order to do it, which is all well and good, but it is it's very expensive on an internal basis to be able to do it. I think the regional component of it would be wonderful. The other problem I think we do have to understand sometimes is that oftentimes these are kids with some relatively severe, oftentimes so it's not simply a situation of being able to put them on a regular bus, so to speak, and send them, and that's, but I agree with you 100%. But
we
it's,
didn't have we went from 600 to 2.1 in 2
yeah,
years.
no, I think.
That's not because all of a sudden,
Yeah.
kids that have unique transportation needs. That's something else.
I do think.
Before, if you don't mind, I just want to have the town manager jump in here.
I'm out of my depths here, but I think part of that jump may have to do with the way that the circuit breaker is used. So it may not be an absolute jump. It may be, you may be looking at the budgeted versus non-budgeted portion. But again, I'm out of my depths. And I was going to note, I mean, we certainly do have some vehicles that we use in-house. I was going to note what you said, that the types of, the needs that the students have that we're transporting in Danvers Public Schools are very different from the needs of the Essex Tech schools. It's just, it's apples and oranges in some ways. So we are doing some transportation in-house, but the types of specialized services that the kids we're talking about, the out-of-district placement, are very different than the slate of needs that Essex Tech is looking at.
Yeah, and just to make the point that I wasn't saying that, look, what they can do it, we can do it. So in some extent, it's exactly what the town manager said, it's the opposite. They can do it because it's a very specialized set of circumstances, both from a procurement standpoint and what they have to provide. Very different than what we have in this situation, unfortunately. But I agree. But I think this is something that probably at the superintendent's level, amongst all superintendents, needs to be discussed and dealt with, because this is certainly an issue that everybody is dealing with. And if it's price gouging, which I think is basically what you're saying is happening, then it's going to be something that's going to have to be done in our state rep and our state senator and the state, people within the state are going to have to either stop being a part of that price gouging and take a stand on it. But it does sound like because of the circuit breaker, that almost adds to the ability to do it as well, would be because it's.
Yeah, somebody's found like the
Yeah.
golden goose, and it's like,
Mr. Chair, what I would say, to redirect back, I think what the school department is doing, what our schools are doing is the right thing. What we must recognize is the needs of children have changed. And so the rise in the need for special services and support is because our children's needs are really, it is an explosion of autism and speech delay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that is, I think, a significant driver, not a price gouging conspiracy, right? Although folks are supply and demand. Transportation companies are making the money that they can make. And if you had to try and hold on to a CDL driver because there is competition, if you didn't raise your rates 2 or 3 times coming out of the pandemic, you lost your drivers. And so we have had drivers go back and forth. It is an industry where very few people want to go into it. And so there are fewer and fewer places to price shop, and we are stuck with what we are stuck with. And there is legitimately a driving need of children who need many, many additional services, that the best thing I think that we can do is what we're doing. The things that we can bring in-house, we'll bring in-house, and that's the only way we will cut costs. We are not going to really be able to curtail the cost of doing business in the transportation industry as someone who's working with them. My drivers are clamoring for more money, or they'll be going driving for someone else.
And when you're scrounging for drivers, you're going to get what you get, and you don't want what you get to be responsible to drive some of these kids to going to places where they have to go. So it is a problem, but I don't want to start if you're not done.
Just trying to help. Just trying to help, Ted. It's tough.
I smell a rat. I did notice that the classroom in the lower elementary schools, the classrooms look a little bit more balanced. So, we're watching.
We're still working on that, absolutely, absolutely. But I appreciate the piece, if you don't mind, on that part too, where, because we've talked with, some sources at a private company in terms of what they're able to offer drivers and things like that. And there are some benefits because, as I believe, I don't want to misspeak, but I know in some cases, they have to pay for their own. There's a training, and if they can be basically fronted the money to go through the training and work, that's just really challenging. So again, we're not opposed to doing what we can. I think I'm so happy the town, it may sound small, but those 2 vans are huge. Because, that's a step, and I know that we were able to procure 2 more 7D vans. And again, grateful to the town where we were able to transition 2 van purchases where it's hard to find vans because I think Amazon's bought them all up. But we transitioned into a bus, so that way we can put an older one out of service, so, but absolutely.
Thank you. Arthur?
And that's why I think what you're trying to do with the budget increase this year, which is obviously higher than what it usually is, but what you're trying to do is what you can do to address this problem, which is to try to build the programs in-house so that these kids aren't going to leave, or the kids that are coming into the system aren't going to leave. And then we avoid these issues, because we're really just a captured entity. We have to pay what they're charging, because we don't have the ability to do anything about transportation on a local level, all right? You do have the ability to try to build the programs. It's going to take a while, but that will help. Same thing with answering Erin's question before. Unless it's changed in the last 2 years, there's no negotiating with the schools that we place students in, because we have to place them there, and so they know that. And so the cost of these schools goes up. The state approves these rises every year, and it becomes more and more costly. So, maybe the state legislature or somebody can do something about that, but we can't. But what we can do is doing what you're trying to do, what you're starting to do now, which is why I look at this as kind of an investment budget. all right, where it's higher, but it's well-placed because, and it's going to take a while. And you may have to have another budget like this next year or the year after, because you're just beginning this process. I'm assuming you haven't got too far with it yet. You're waiting for a new student services director, correct?
Correct. If you don't mind, I can.
Okay, yeah.
We've had to implement a few items off of ESSER to make some moves to
Yeah.
essentially keep our students in. There were some critical situations that came up, and certainly we needed to make some moves to provide the accommodations that were necessary, or we were in real trouble.
Yeah. And as far as the payback, it could result in a great payback for budgets long-term if we can develop the programs where the kids don't have to leave. I don't necessarily know you're going to get kids back, because once they're placed, I don't think you're going to get them back unless there's some, unless there's they're probably comfortable where they are. But we certainly can have the programs where we don't have to send them out. And I think the things that you're looking at are exactly what we need to be doing. So that's why I don't have any problem at all with the budget increase this year. And the other thing is, it's not a time really to be skimping, because there's still a lot of, let's say, student recovery that needs to be done.
Absolutely.
And that's going to take a few years too. And you can't take away from what we're trying to do and try to build back and get back to where we were and get ahead of where we were. So, so the budget it makes a lot of sense to me. And I really do think that it will pay dividends down the road if you can successfully implement some of these programs. But for people that are looking, it's going to take a few years to see that payback. But as you can see, these are the huge drivers. These are the things that you can't control. The other thing is you'll be able to know what you're budgeting for more, because you won't have you'll be able to handle more of these cases when somebody moves into the district or things like that. So, so I think, I'm very comfortable with where the budget is this year. Obviously, we can't be this high always, but we need to invest to be able to do this. And we've been talking about, Eric and I have been talking about trying to develop programs, in-house. And now I think we're really seeing something where we're taking concrete steps there, which involves money. And so I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a big job for you and the staff, but I think you can do it. I think if you have a good plan, and so I'm hoping that it works out. I think the only other, now the more important thing, I think that what I'd like to see you do is maybe form a 9-person committee to meet over the next several months to discuss the issue of the cost of lacrosse. And I think if you can do that.
I would appreciate if we could finally get to the bottom of that.
Because what I want to do, what I want, Dan, is I don't want to hear Mike ask that
blue
question.
ribbon
I don't want to
group is
hear
what
Mike
I'm
ask the
calling
question
it.
ever again, okay?
I was hoping to get a question on how to stop the wing tee off tackle. But
Can't
But no,
do that.
But, I think it's a good budget, and I support it.
Could I just, and it's nothing to do, but I think for people, the 10 people at home who are probably watching this, whoever it is, I think sometimes when we talk about special ed and we talk about outplacements, we become, I think a lot of people would look at our discussions and say, oh, they're worried about it from it's a financial thing. We're putting dollars and cents on these kids. And I think what's perhaps most important for folks to understand, and I know you guys understand this, is that our local students are best served when we can keep them in our local programs. And unfortunately, there are many times that a kid's needs cannot be met by our local programs. There happens to be a lot of cost benefit and other issues that come out of it. But at the end of the day, what I think is really great with what you guys are committed to is developing programs that will meet our kids' needs and let them stay in the system with their brothers and sisters and stay with their neighbors, and to be able to continue to go to that local school and to be a part of that community and to keep those kids in that community. It's good for both those kids and for the community as a whole. And I think that that's really the key with what you're trying to do. Yes, it's going to hopefully be a great investment, and we all agree with that. But I think we all also agree that this is what's right for the students as well. So,
Thank you.
thanks.
I appreciate that, and if I can just add, is it okay if I just Mr. Scarmus, and I appreciate that piece too, and, you know, bringing the students back, ultimately, you know, that's challenging because they have the right to stay in the placement, but looking at the great things that are happening, that's where you may have an opportunity to bring students back, because you have the opportunity to participate in extracurriculars and things that we have, and that is part of the, we didn't bring it forward, but we were looking to build more of an alternate program at the high school, that maybe U2 and 3, but I appreciate that point, because ideally, we want to keep our students because they're with their cohort, they're with their peers, and there's so many things to offer, so.
Yeah.
I
No,
appreciate that point.
Yeah, if a student wants to come back, that's great, if we can take care of them, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, questions from the audience? Bill?
Good evening, Bill Bates, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. I just want to thank the 5 members of the school committee that had the foresight to bring in a superintendent and a business manager that we see here tonight. So the new part that we talk about, the new excitement, is kudos to the 5 members of the school committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just like to acknowledge Robin. I believe you're not running for re-election, so thank you for your service, and you'll certainly be missed.
You'll still see me.
Noted. Okay.
No,
You won't be back. Oh, you will be back. Okay.
No, I meant like in the town.
We have an opening on the finance committee.
Oh, I was not, no one talked to me about that.
Okay.
I don't know about that.
But thank you very much for your service.
She's going to head the lacrosse.
Yes. The Lacrosse Blue Ribbon Commission.
Move the budget.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? You have a budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your support, thank you.
Or at least a recommendation. Yeah. Why don't we take a 5-minute break and allow land use to get organized and come back. Thank you.
Right on it. Next year, I expect an answer next year.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Moving on to land use and community services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From a $52 million budget to a $2 million budget, but they punch way above their weight class. We have the Land Use and Community Services team, most of them here in the audience. What you see on the screen is the roll-up of each of the divisions, but we're going to go through the following slides to see division by division what is happening. This starts on page 67 in the budget book. And as you'll see in the table on page 67, there are no changes to headcount or staffing across these divisions. The theme here will be similar to the theme last night. A number of the positions in these departments were reviewed as part of the comp and class study, and adjustments were made accordingly for those positions. And in a number of areas, and in fact across the board, operating budgets were down around 7% across these divisions for a net increase of the 4.7 that you see on the screen. First is inspectional services. Our building commissioner, Tim Hudon, is in the audience. Several of the positions in that department received adjustments as part of the comp and class study. And one of the drivers in the budget this year pertains to a change in the requirements from the state in terms of how local establishments that use scales, gas stations, candy shops, et cetera, are inspected each year. We used to have a contractor do that for the town, but the state changed the requirements, and communities above a certain size had to have that duty assigned to an actual town employee. In the future, we can have conversations about partnering with other communities, but at this point, we had an employee who was happy to take those duties on, and so we had to purchase tools so that person could do these inspections in-house. And we provided a stipend as well for the employee to do that. We'd be happy to take questions you have about that or the budget itself.
Arthur?
I'm all set.
Ted?
No questions.
Aaron?
No questions.
Paul?
No questions.
Nothing.
No, thank you.
Questions from the audience? Bill?
Just one comment. Again, as far as sustainability, the inspectional services budget over the last 2 years has increased 13%. 7 this year, 6 last year. I'm just concerned that are we getting to the point we can afford these? Thank you.
Thank you.
Move the budget?
Mr. Chair, just a note, we'll take 2 votes for this division, or for this department. The first will be for the first 5 budgets. They're all voted as one budget, and then recreation is voted separately. So we'll hold the vote for now. Second budget is the public health budget. Frank Giacalone, our health director, is in the audience. And again, similar story here. We have an increase in salary and wages from the common class study. And Frank was able to go and look at the line items as part of the effort to reduce $750,000 from the budget, look for some areas where we weren't fully utilizing lines, and that's why the operating budget is decreased. Page 71 in your budget book, and we'd be happy to answer questions.
Mike?
By the way, this is where the cat question came up before. I won't ask him about that, so.
Frank, you'll be spared that. You don't have to answer that question.
Thanks.
Eric?
Nothing.
Paul?
All set.
No questions.
No questions.
All set.
Questions from the audience? Is there oh, no, we're not. Next?
Next is planning and economic development. Our planning director, Brian Zakelli, is not here, but Aaron Henry, the director of land use and community services, is here. Page 73 in your budget book, same stories with health, and we would be happy to answer questions.
Arthur?
I'm good.
Ted?
I'm good.
All set.
Paul?
Just one quick one. Does the planning department take part in zoning? Obviously you do, but how about ZBA hearings? Yeah, okay, thank you. That's it.
Eric? Nothing. Mike?
No, thank you.
Questions from the audience?
Okay. You have a question? Next is Senior and Social Services. The director is not in the room, but I did attend this afternoon. We had a welcoming reception over at the Senior Center. I'm pleased to announce that we have hired a new Senior and Social Services Director, a gentleman named Matt Mitchell. He currently works in the prevention services as a prevention services manager for the city of Somerville. Has a degree in psychology from Holy Cross, is a licensed social worker, very enthusiastic, met staff today, had a chance to meet the chairs of the Council on Aging and the Friends, and we're very excited to have him starting later this month. So he's not here tonight, he still has a job for the city of Somerville, but we will have his undivided attention starting April 22nd. Again, similar story here, we had a couple of positions in that department that received adjustments as part of the comp and class, and we would be happy to answer questions.
Mike?
Nope, thank you.
Eric?
I have several. Unfortunately, since the director's not here, probably are ones that
You
would
could
be.
try, we can follow up tomorrow with answers.
So let me give the trend of my thoughts on this, because I know that this is we have a significant investment in our community. I was interested in refreshing the demographics, right? So kind of how many seniors are we servicing and where that is going, just to get some concept and projections on that. And then in general, since I partner with a number of agencies that provide senior care and senior services, they are generally, when I look at the size of this budget, this is modest. I mean, $339,000 doesn't even move the needle for the folks that I'm partnering with that are $100 million operations that are doing senior services. And so my question becomes, is there something that we can be doing with these other entities who seem to be making money as opposed to just providing services? And so that's a longer question I think will be with the director, but I don't understand the business enough to know how some folks are making money doing services like this because they're clearly, these are private nonprofits, not municipalities. And so those are my thoughts.
Yeah, so I can offer some general responses to that, and then I think we can have some specific follow-up. But the two demographics that are growing in Danvers are the 65-plus population and the under-18 population.
Okay.
And we've referred to this in land use summits in the past as like the dumbbell. Like the ends of the dumbbell are growing, the middle is not. So there's going to be more demand for services for youth and services for seniors as we move forward. The $380,000 operating budget, we also have about $175,000 to $200,000 revolving fund, which is fee-based programming that's offered. The Senior Center for years has partnered and utilized grants to extend their reach a little bit. So the tax-supported budget doesn't paint the full picture, but I think the point is well taken, which is that the demand is only going to go up and not down. And that was a big part of the conversation we had with Mr. Mitchell in the onboarding is thinking creatively about interdepartmental programming, intergenerational programming, thinking outside the box in terms of, tapping into, we have a network of very competent and talented and creative retirees living in Danvers who could probably help extend the impact and the reach of that department as well. So I don't know if that starts to answer the question.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. No, I think just understanding the trend is what I was very much interested in, and I think that's helpful.
We'd love to have you join the Council on Aging Board, Eric.
I'm a little bored out. But I would be interested in a conversation to see how I might be able to connect some folks.
I would wonder, I guess, that when we talk about sort of those cross-departmental things, I would assume that a lot of the programming that the Recreation Department does, especially through the revolving accounts and some of the programming that they do, probably also services people who are in that 65-plus demographic. Would that be?
I think to an extent, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to do more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, just a couple. What, do you have any figures as to what the senior population actually is, age 65 plus?
We could pull that census data up for you. Yeah.
Just curiosity, but I'm not surprised at all that it's the upper and the lower, the younger group that have the bigger populations. The other question, I think, is maybe a little what Eric is referring to. I don't know, but does every town, surrounding town, let's say Hamilton, Wenham, Topsfield, Middleton, do they all have senior centers? Yes. They do, okay. Because I was thinking if, maybe we would get folks from those areas coming in, take part in some of the activities, but if they have their own center, then it'd be a question.
21% of Danvers residents are 65 or over.
I think what we both.
They have
wanted to
these
look at-
things,
Yes.
Mr. 65 over, that they call phones.
Yeah, it's right here, it's on you. You just stick with the cat licenses. That's all.
I think we're going to have to
Cross,
put
I've
our
moved on to
phones in
the
little
cross.
pouches at the beginning of our
One more,
meeting.
Mr. Chairman, Ted, do you think you're gonna get rid of these phones? You can't even get rid of them on this table.
Oh, young
Our frontal lobes have developed.
developed.
I'm good, come back.
Not the lobes.
Did you have any other questions about the senior and social services budget?
While you, everyone else set? Questions from the audience? No.
And do we now move to
My clicker stopped working.
21%? No, veterans.
The last but certainly not least is our Veterans Services budget. Kelly Reyes Teixeira, our Veteran Service Officer, is in the audience tonight. The staff in her division were also part of the comp and class study, and a number of adjustments were made for them as well. The operating expenses are level. Page 77, and just a footnote, we reviewed the benefits and insurance budget yesterday, and the Chapter 115 benefits for our veterans is budgeted there and not in this budget. So she manages those expenses, but they're part of the benefits budget. And we would be happy to take questions.
Ted?
All set.
All set, thanks.
Molly?
All set.
Eric?
How many of our veterans are seniors?
Mike?
Gotta give me at least a minute to. Yeah.
Oh, I'll ask a question for you, Kelly, if you could go to the podium. Just as a, how many veterans do you work with on an annual basis in town? I know there are, many veterans that are members of our community, but how many are you working with on a regular basis? Say annually, approximately.
I would say, that's a good question.
It's a lot.
Yes, it's a revolving door, the list that I have is over a couple hundred that I've made contact with. And between Chapter 115 and the claims, it's about, I would say, a couple hundred. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact number, but it's growing.
The town manager asked me to get you a stumper, so, yeah.
Not
No,
true.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't.
She knows.
Well, I'm
No.
trying. But
Try
thank you.
another. Okay.
Any questions from the audience? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. That was everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
Recreation.
And recreation, page 79 in the budget book, we have a slight decrease in the operating budget to try to offset part of the adjustment for salary and wages. There were quite a few positions under the recreation umbrella that were part of the comp and class study. And Mr. Mountain is not here tonight, but Mr. Henry and I would be happy to take any questions you have about recreation.
Not so much a question, but I think just a comment, and that's going to be that, I think we just spent an hour and a half spending an excellent amount of time, a large portion of which was talking about the need to be able to provide services for the special needs kids and to keep them in town. I think it's really important for people to recognize that the recreation department is sort of the other half of that equation. And they provide so many of those services in the summertime. They're to help out with those folks that are here that are new citizens or new residents, and trying to help out with those. And so, it's always amazing to me when you look at the job that gets done within this budget. And again, I think people sometimes just think, well, it's the park program. They throw balls out there and the kids stay busy all summer. But These programs that they provide, whether it's after school or summertime, really work hand in hand with the school department. We will have no chance of accomplishing what we want to accomplish with the school department if we don't support this budget as well. So,
If I could echo that, I think, Dan is gone, but David Mountain and Nick Campion work very closely with Dan Bauer and Mary Wormers and their teams to make sure that what's happening in the schools is in line with what rec is doing and vice versa. After-school care, summer programming, it truly is collaborative, and not every town can say that. Eric?
I'll just give a comment on my experience with the Recreation Department. It swings on the pendulum. Either I've already registered for a program, and when I see the flyer for recreation, I'm already full, or when I see the flyer the same day, I go to register and it's waitlisted. It is out of control. So some programs are just really, 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 really popular.
Sorry, I probably shouldn't, but I will just say, this year, for the first time since COVID, we actually had to waitlist several programs that haven't had a waitlist since pre-COVID. And everyone's like, well, just hire more staff. That's a little harder to do than just snapping our fingers. But it's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have.
Unfortunately, we have a lot of families that were, sad to learn that they're on a wait list. But that's the first time that's happened in a number of years, and we've talked about that at length, about how to tackle that going forward.
It means you're doing a great job. We had our hearts broken a few times, but, just keep doing a great job
There
that
are
you're doing.
other camps and other weeks available.
The earlier they get posted, because I plan months ahead, so the further out it is, the easier it is to get
I
in.
think we went like 3 to 4 weeks earlier than we normally did this year, and we're again really caught off guard a little bit by the amount of interest in some of our more popular programs. So we're working on that for down the road.
I am not
but-
complaining. I was just sharing that
Yep.
experience. There you go.
is Roger Day's Snakes cheerleading camp still the most popular one, or is it?
That's one of them. That's one.
Thank you.
Paul?
I have no questions, but I fully support the program and the budget. Thank you.
Wally? Okay.
I agree with everybody. I support it. It's great. We use it, and I'm thankful. Thank you.
Ted?
No questions.
I'm probably biased because I've been on the Recreation Committee for about 20 years now, but for my money, it's the biggest bang for the buck that we get in town. The amount of people that use it, and it's back to now where it was before the pandemic, and staffing was a problem over the past couple of years too, but, now staffing is better, but apparently not enough staff to fulfill the needs of the town, so, but they do a great job, and Dave and Nick. And then also, I want to mention that the new athletic director is working seamlessly with those two too, which is great, yeah, so, no, budget's great.
Anything from the audience?
Move the budget.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Before night.
Wow.
Before we adjourn, I just want to acknowledge Mr. Bradstreet didn't get up for any questions, but he is in the audience tonight. And we appreciate having our Sergeant-at-Arms back with us.
That
Thank
scares me because it means he's saving them up for something else.
That's right. Meeting adjourned until tomorrow at 7.